I think considering how you spend time with your team is important.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a couple of things. The way you do staff meetings, how often you have staff meetings. Are you offering additional supervision, either individual or group supervision at your practice? And what other things are you doing for your team to foster community and to show them that you appreciate them?
This episode is sponsored by TherapyNotes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out, and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Well, hey folks, it's Gordon, and welcome to the podcast. This is episode number 376 of the Practice of Therapy podcast, and I'm really looking forward to you hearing from one of my bestest friends. Yeah, I guess I made that word up, or we use that in the South here. One of my best friends, Whitney Owens, joins me again on the podcast. I believe Whitney has been on this podcast more than any other person, and I know that a year or two ago she did a podcast takeover for me, in which she spent the month of July, I believe it was, or June, I can't remember, but we'll have links in the show notes here. She joined it, came in, and just did my podcast for a month. So it was a big help to me, and hopefully it was to her. But anyway, looking forward to you hearing from Whitney. And in this particular episode, we're going to talk about retaining therapists, and particularly if you're in a group practice, how you create a culture in your practice that is going to sustain you for the long haul. You know, I think as Whitney and I talk about, there is something about being able to create a culture or a place, a workplace that is appealing to people and that they feel like have a great sense of purpose in what they do. So anyway, we're going to delve into this conversation here shortly. But before I get to that conversation, one of the things that, particularly if you're in a practice, kind of like Whitney's, that is a cash-based practice, one of the struggles sometimes, particularly as you're getting started, is getting enough clients on your caseload. And so one of the ways to get clients in the door is with Google Ads. It helps people find you better, find you quicker, and it's usually a really good return on your investment. In other words, it pays for itself. So one of the things I've done is I've partnered with Fully Booked Pros, and they are a company that are experts in helping particular counselors and therapists create Google ads that are effective and reach the people they want to reach. So I'd love for you to go check out them at going to practiceoftherapy.com/FBP. That's practiceoftherapy.com/FBP. And you'll get to find out all the different things that they do to help counselors and therapists and those people in private practice create Google ads. So be sure and check them out. And also, before we get to my conversation with Whitney, I'd also love for you to check out Mental Health Wear TN. That's mentalhealthweartn.com. And we've partnered recently with Hope Unite, hopeunite.org, and we are making sure that $5 from every purchase of a t-shirt goes to hopeunite.org. And so they are they are an organization that are in the world of suicide prevention awareness and really doing some great work and just helping people become more aware of mental health and mental wellness. And so you can check them out, hopeunite.org, but also check out mentalhealthwaretn.com. And again, before we get to my conversation with Whitney, I'd love for you to hear from one of the members of the Psychcraft Network, along with some words from our sponsor of the podcast, TherapyNotes.
Hi there. I'm super excited to welcome you back to the brand new season of Scaling Therapy Practice podcast. This is the show where we encourage you to take deliberate steps towards sustainable growth. I'm your host, James Marland. In season 2, we're specifically focused on one main topic, marketing for mental health providers. Every week, we're going to share about different parts of marketing, giving you simple tips and tricks to grow your mental health business. Every episode from season 2 will have a download or a handout from the show. So sign up for our newsletter so you don't miss these valuable resources. Good news, I'm not going to be doing the show alone. I've got some awesome friends who are going to be joining me from the Psychcraft Network. You're going to hear from Lisa Mustard, Steve Bisson, Dawn Gabriel, and other special guests. We've joined forces for this season to share helpful advice on things we've learned and even the mistakes we've made so that you don't have to make them. As the weeks go by, listen to us cover lots of topics on marketing, such as social media, how to market your own therapist, how to speak in public, and even how to start your own podcast or even just guest on podcast shows. We really want to hear from our listeners, so send us your questions, your comments, your thoughts to james@coursecreationstudio.com. That's james@coursecreationstudio.com. Make sure you check out season 1, which is out now, and it has lots of tips on scaling your therapy practice. Just go to coursecreationstudio.com and click the podcast section. So join us every Monday. We're going to learn a lot about intentional and sustainable growth for your therapy practice.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because TherapyNotes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. And I'm thrilled to have back with me one of my dearest, bestest friends, Whitney Owens, on the podcast again. And if you'll go back to episode 232 through 235, you can hear Whitney's takeover of my podcast that's happened, 2 years ago, Whitney?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So Whitney is also a consultant, and she's the owner of Wise Practice Consulting, and she's also the owner of Water's Edge Counseling. But Whitney, tell folks a little more about yourself for those that don't know you.
Yes. Well, Gordon, thank you. And your podcast has always been special to my heart. I listened to your show before we met, and I couldn't wait to meet the Gordon Brewer. So I feel just honored for our friendship over the years and opportunities to be on your show and your kindness to me. But yes, I'm based out of Savannah, which is on the coast. You can hear it in my accent that I am in the South. I love living here. It's beautiful, the oak trees, the beach. It's a great place to raise my family. I have two little girls, ages 12 and 8. Maybe they're not so little anymore, but they are in my heart. I have a husband who is also a pastor of a small Methodist church just outside of Savannah. So I have the pastor's wife hat that I also wear at times, as well as a group practice owner. We have a faith-based private practice here in Savannah. It has 18 therapists, I believe, in 2 locations. So we have grown more than I ever anticipated that I would, but God has a way of doing that. And then started doing faith-based consulting back in 2019 because I saw there was just a need for, there's great business consultants out there, but for me, I was wanting to integrate my faith into the process and had a hard time finding that. And then God found me and said, "You're doing this, Whitney." And so I did. And so now we have Wise Practice Consulting. So.
Right. Well, yeah. And the thing that's been just amazing in this whole journey, I guess, Whitney, you and I met in 2018, somewhere around then. And so, but we meet weekly for a mastermind group with 2 other of our good friends, Uriah Guilford and Jessica Tepana. And so one of the things that I know has been just so important for me, and this is really, I think Whitney would agree with this, is the important to have peers and colleagues that you can trust, that you can share everything about your business and all of that sort of thing. And just really rich friendships that have developed. Whitney and James have become some of my best friends, and I've gotten to hang out a few times with their daughters, and just I have conversations with James that Whitney doesn't even know about. So, but
well, that makes my heart happy, Gordon.
Yeah. So, but today, Whitney and I started thinking about what we wanted to talk about today. And I think the one topic that comes up, particularly for group practice owners, is how we retain our employees, because one of the things that I think we're seeing a lot is that there's a big shortage of mental health providers just across the country. And so there are lots of opportunities, and there are a lot of people that are interested in going into private practice, but I think there's also a lot of people that figure out pretty quickly that might not be their jam. And so they go to work for somebody like me or for Whitney. And one of the most costly things for a group practice is to lose somebody. So, but Whitney, I know your practice, you have just built, how many employees do you have now?
I think 20.
Okay. And she's opened a second location too. So that's pretty impressive.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I've had Water's Edge counseling since 2014, and not something I ever planned to do. I moved to Savannah and couldn't find a job. So I opened my own practice, and it worked. And then in 2018 was just busting at the seams. That was after I'd had my second child, had come back from maternity leave, and was like, I have nowhere to put all these clients. And so I was like, I guess I'll start hiring. Now, thankfully, I hired a business coach at that time. I hear so many people just hire willy-nilly and they make a ton of mistakes. And yes, I did make mistakes, but I did have a business coach for 2 years that helped me through the process of starting and growing my group practice. And I'll forever be indebted to that time in my life. And that was about the time I met you as well, Gordon. We were on a retreat together with a lot of group practice owners. But it was in 2018, I hired my first therapist, and my third that I hired that year, she's still with me. I was just thinking about her this morning. So she's been with me over 6 years. She's been fully licensed the whole time. Lots of experience, over 30 years experience, in fact. Yeah. And so now we're at about 18 therapists right now. And I have an intake coordinator who works full time. I have an office manager who's full time. We're actually in the process of hiring a second intake person right now, because I'm a huge proponent of that intake process, answering the phone live. And so we're missing some calls now because we're getting so many calls. So we're looking at adding a second person for that. So that's kind of where we are right now. And, Gordon, we were talking about what to talk about today. I just see so many group practices struggle in lots of ways, but one of them, financially, it's a big hit, is when a therapist leaves your practice. Depending on what you have in your paperwork on this, It could look like a lot of different things. Some people do have contracts that would require that somebody not take clients. Like you can't take clients, you can't work within this amount of space from here, this many miles from the group practice. So there's so many different ways to set that up, and you have to set it up the way that works for you. But regardless of how you set it up, there will be some financial cost. Of course, the emotional cost is also really high. Your morale in your practice, you as a business owner, I mean, it doesn't matter how long I've been doing this, it hurts every time. And I still have to deal with, am I good enough? Am I cut out for this? Is this what I want to do? So all that and the financial loss to your practice when someone leaves.
Right, right. Yeah, it's always important, I think, on the front end to really, I think, just really outline your expectations for someone, because I think that, I've learned a lot of stuff the hard way of just not really throwing out those expectations and, having someone that you think's going to be a great fit and all of that sort of thing. And it just turns out to be, they're not a great fit.
Yeah, and there's only so much we can get in the interview. I mean, I have actually an 8-step interview process that I walk through with people, and it's pretty extensive, but you're never gonna know everything through the interview process. People are gonna make their way through. That's just what's gonna happen. So we can't feel bad about that. We can perfect our interview process. We can, like you said, do better about setting expectations, writing job descriptions. In fact, I never had a very good job description until last year. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, it was like, here's your offer letter. Let's chat about it. But I didn't have it written out very clearly. I didn't say, here are the success measures of getting your notes done on time. Here's the success measure of keeping your clients. This is what it looks like for me. And so as I'm improving that, I think it will improve the overall quality of the clinicians, but they will also know what I'm expecting out of them. It is so hard. And I know you can agree with this. Those first few therapists I hired, they struggle with all the new stuff because that's not what it was when they were hired. And that's understandable.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things in just thinking about retaining people is, we preach all the time, just, having good systems and processes in place. And and so as I think about that, what have you found that really have been the key systems and processes that you've put in place that have helped retain people?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it starts right at the beginning in your hiring process, that you have a really streamlined, easy system for that. It's going to weed people out, but it's also going to make it easy for you to see the people that are the best fit for your practice. That could come down to the types of questions you ask in the interview. We also have an Enneagram that we send to them, and we have a very specific email. We do the same email to every person, and it's amazing the responses we get. People who don't follow the directions, people who do. So there's some things there in that process that are helpful. And your onboarding process, how do you choose to do that? So it could be that you're doing it through videos, or you're doing it through one-on-ones, or in a group setting. And I think the way you structure your onboarding speaks to the culture of your practice. And it's something we have to think about. This is their first interactions with working for you. What do you want those to look like? So for me, our culture is very much personable. Like, that's a Water's Edge counseling. We make you feel like family when you're on this team. And so when we do our training, we want it to be an interaction. It's not just watch these videos, take these tutorials. We're sitting down with you and showing you how to use TherapyNotes. We're sitting down with you and talking through each policy, doing the suicide training, helping you understand that. Now, that used to be me doing all that. As it's grown, I don't have capacity. I just can't do it. And I do think that by me doing it, it sets a standard that I'm the one you come to. But now that I've changed it, the person that's in charge of HR systems for that, you go to her to understand TherapyNotes, to understand Gusto, to understand those things. When you want to understand more clinical things, you go to your supervisor. When you want to understand more managerial things, you go to the clinical manager. So we bring these people in to do those parts of the training. And I've seen that over time, the newer therapists go to those people because they've been trained by them. And then the therapists that have been here for ages, they still come to me because that's what they've gotten used to. So I think it
Right.
really does start with that process right there at the beginning. I think there's some other things when you're thinking about culture. I mean, I think that culture is really where it starts for retaining
Yeah.
therapists, that you're really communicating that in the interview, the onboarding, and consistently. You're going back in staff meetings, you're talking about the values of your practice, you're talking about the mission of the practice so that you're all on the same page as you're working together to do this within your community. It's not just each therapist on their lone island. You created a group practice for a reason. So you've got to show them what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. When you think about defining your culture, what steps? I know you do a lot of consulting with people as well, Whitney, but when you think about how to define your culture, what advice would you give around that?
And this is such a good question, Gordon. And I'm currently working on this, even in my own
Mm-hmm.
practice, because specifically when I was opening my second location, I thought, how do I maintain the culture of Water's Edge counseling in two locations where I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be at both locations? I can't control that. And as you grow too, culture is more and more important to implement and teach because you're going to potentially lose something if you're not intentional about it. And I think that's something I have learned a lot about. Sometimes I'm just like, yeah, it'll be fine. No, like the things that are important, I need to talk about them over and over again, show them what it looks like. So actually last November, as we were preparing for this new location, we had a 3-hour workshop and I got some forms completed in advance from team members. And it was some questions about, what values do you see? How do you see these values lived out? What do you love about working here? And things like that. And then we did a 3 to 4 hour workshop where we defined the mission. We
Mm-hmm.
discussed values. We identified what those look like. We discussed where we're going. They gave ideas of what they want to do with Water's Edge Counseling. So the team felt heard, they felt seen. And I'm also able to go back and go, hey, you came up with this. This isn't just Whitney, the boss, said, here's what our mission is, go do it. We are doing it together. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really powerful. So we put all that together and I put it all on a worksheet. I also sent them the results of all the forms so they could see it. And we meet and we talk about this. In fact, in staff meeting just this week, I said, hey, here's the worksheet. Here's what these things look like. How did you see teamwork this week? How did you
Mm-hmm.
see integrity? What did someone do to express that to you? Let's talk about that as a team. And so my plan is that just about every staff meeting or every other staff meeting, a 15-minute, hey, let's go back to what we're all about. And how did you see this played out?
Mm-hmm. Were there any things that you got with that feedback that surprised you, maybe?
Yes, definitely. Some of it was about feeling confused about the onboarding process and things that we thought were pretty clear. They were feeling uncertain about, like some of the policies. So that was good to get that feedback about. Another thing was feeling like it's toxic wouldn't be the right word, but just feeling like it wasn't as friendly of an environment as it had been. So we were able to spend some time really exploring what that looks like. And we're still working on that, because
Mm-hmm.
as you grow, there's going to be more opinions. There's going to be more gossip. There's going to be more drama. And we live in a culture, Gordon, where people think the boss is just making all the money. Like
Yeah.
that's
Right.
what's set out there. And we know, you and I know as group practice centers and from
Mm-hmm.
working with group practice centers, that is not the case. It's not like I'm gallivanting around the world with all this money that I've made. I don't live in a mansion. I don't have a really expensive car, but I have to remind them of that. Like that's not true, and I think the more you grow, it can give that impression if you don't kind of go back to what the values are and who you are and help them remember that.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. One of the things that I think comes up and just along those lines is I think for depending on how you're set up, I know for my practice, with it being a smaller practice, our clinicians are responsible for collecting from the clients
Mm,
as far as, their payments. And, we've
yeah.
got it set up in TherapyNotes to where, they can just do it all in line there. Now we do have our intake coordinator that's there some of the time and she collects it part of the time, but the problem I think sometimes happens is that they do see, okay, you're collecting this amount, but I'm getting paid this amount. And so, how do you handle that with your therapists that come up with that kind of stuff?
Gordon, I know you can see my facial expression here. This happened yesterday.
Yes.
Literally, a therapist was sitting in front of me. And first of all, I think it's so important that we're transparent about money. We need to be talking about it. If you've got questions, look, I want to be held accountable for the way I spend money. That's really important. And it's, especially as the group practice grows, that's a harder and harder thing to manage. I know it seems like, oh, you've got more money, you can do more. Well, you know what? There's a lot more expenses and a lot more people to care for. And if I'm doing something that's not good, I want someone to tell me, right? So he sat in my office and he looked at me and he said, so I collect this much when I see a client and you get this much when I see a client. That's exactly how he said it. And I immediately stopped him and I said, I want you to change your language because that is not what happens. I don't walk away with that money every time you see a client. Like he was like, oh yeah. Water's Edge Counseling. And I said, exactly. And I said, do you want to talk through where all this money goes? I'm happy to discuss that with you. And he was like, well, at this point, he said, I've already understand because we've had this conversation a couple of times. But I think it's good to be transparent. Now, does your team need to know every dollar and everything? And do you always have to have someone breathing down your neck about money? No, and that's not appropriate. They don't need to know everything. But I think talking to them about, like, for example, for him, he says, I make this much. And I said, you also get retirement matching. Did you calculate that? You also get health insurance. That's $6,000 a year I put towards that for you. Did you calculate the taxes that I have to pay on all that money that comes in? There's 20 to 30% gone. And then we talked a little bit about opening your private practice. I was like, yeah, these are things you would have to think about if you want to open a practice one day. Not that I want you not to, but actually being in a group practice, if it's set up really well, you can make really good money.
Right.
Right. And he was like, oh. And when I started explaining to him how it is opening a private practice, how hard it is at the beginning financially, he was like, oh. So, and they don't think about how much you spend on marketing. They don't think about how much you're spending on the person that takes the calls. I even was sitting down with one of my therapists not too long ago. She's one that's been with me a long time. And she's one I like to go to get feedback on things. And I said, hey, I want you to see this ROI calculator. I actually got this from Therapy Flow. If somebody's looking for an ROI calculator, and you can put in like how much money you're spending on Google Ads and different things. And it was showing me with this particular clinician, if she doesn't get a client to number 6 sessions, we don't make any money off of it. That's where we break even. And I said that to one of my therapists. She was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. Because all they think about is the money from that session. If they don't get it to sessions 4, 6, 8, we're not making any profit. And profit is not about us being rich, even though it is nice to have some money. It's about doing our mission in our community. If we don't have profit, we can't do it. And I can't pay y'all, and we can't all enjoy our work.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. I think one of the things that is hard for even those of us that are private practice owners is to have that money conversation of really being honest about that. And also, one of the things that I've done that I think is a really good exercise is, particularly when you do your reviews with your therapists and that kind of thing, is to print out or create a document that shows not only what they're getting paid in their paycheck, but also what are the things that the practices are paying for on their behalf. So like you mentioned, the FICA, the health insurance, all of the things, liability insurance, whatever it might be, and then, show that as the bottom line. So yeah, this is your take home, but this is what you're actually getting. And this is what it costs the company to give you a place to work.
I think that's so important, Gordon. That's a good point. When we talk about retaining therapists, another thing that I think I see with practices that's so important is being a W-2 based practice. That W-2 model And both you and I went through that transformation years ago, and it's been super helpful. And there's so many reasons why I love W-2 that we could do. Actually, I was going to say we could do another podcast, but I think we already did that
Yeah.
on your show about 1099
Yeah.
to W-2, I'm pretty sure. But we do tend to find that practices with a W-2 based model retain therapists better than a 1099 practice. And so I think that's something to be considered if you're a group practice owner and you're seeing more turnover. No, it is so easy for a 1099 to leave. We make it too easy. They have their own LLC, their own bank account, they have their own practice in essence, and then they come contract out with you. It's too easy,
Right.
And we do tend to see with that model, people are less bought in. They're working multiple jobs. When we have a W-2 model, people are usually working full time. They're more, not always, but usually they're more bought into the mission, the vision of the practice. This is my job, and then we give them so much health insurance, retirement, and we run things for them that it makes it harder to leave because they have such a good setup. And again, they want to stay with you because you give them a job that they love. It's not just the W-2 part, it's a lot more than that. But you are creating something where someone enjoys their job so much that they don't want to leave. And I think that's really important when we're talking about culture and we're talking about retention of therapists.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a big point to all of that is people don't work for a paycheck. They work for things that are going to bring them meaning or going to give them purpose, or they feel like they're making a difference, that they matter. All of those things are why people stay in a job. Certainly pay is important, and you don't want to be, working in a place where you're struggling financially or whatever. But I think all of that. And also, one thing is a perk that somebody could offer if they have a group practice is just some instruction on financial management. Just, having people come in and talk about that and that sort of thing. I think there's just a lot of opportunities around how we create our cultures and that sort of thing.
Definitely. I think considering how you spend time with your team is important. So that could be a couple of things. The way you do staff meetings, how often you have staff meetings. Are you offering additional supervision, either individual or group supervision at your practice? And what other things are you doing for your team to foster community and to show them that you appreciate them? So to kind of go into a few of these for our practice, we have staff meeting every other week. And that's a time that we connect with one another. It is a time that we answer questions, address things. And we do this lots of different ways. And as we've changed over time, we've had to change staff meeting. As we've grown, I'm starting to find that smaller question answer times with smaller groups is becoming really beneficial. So even though we get together all on Zoom or however we're doing it, we also break up into smaller groups so that people feel heard, and I think it's really important that people feel like they have a place to voice that. We do group supervision throughout the month. We have a couple supervision consultation, a licensed therapist one, an associate level one, and then all the associates get individual supervision as well. We do try to do a quarterly fun event for the team, and I think that helps. Last event we went and did, actually we had our Christmas party. That was the last one. So we're in the process of maybe doing an escape room soon. So we did improv comedy a little while back, and we hired somebody to kind of just work with our team privately. And that was way more fun than anyone anticipated it being. So we like doing that. We do birthday gifts, and those go really far. A thoughtful birthday gift can really mean a lot to a team member. So all those things are important that you're implementing to show them that you appreciate them.
Right. Yeah. And I think as much as anything, it all comes down to community and really creating community within your practice and just people. I mean, I love it to see when my people, they go and do things. I might not be available or whatever, but they still go do things together.
Oh no. Isn't that sweet? Yeah.
Yeah.
We just had St. Patrick's Day, and right on the other side of the square, two of my employees are hanging out with their parents Like their parents all came in town and they're hanging out. I was like, this is really special, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
another thing I want to make sure to say here, and this is something that's a little more recent that I am really trying to work on and have worked on in my own coaching, is letting go of situations and people that are not helpful to your culture.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, you want to develop your culture, you want people implementing it. But when you see someone who is doing the opposite of your culture, addressing that head on. I think a lot of therapists were anxious to talk to our team. We think they're going to leave. We think they're going to have a negative outcome. And so we don't address situations early enough as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We don't set those expectations. And then we get into bad situations later.
Yeah.
I am notorious for thinking the best of everyone and wanting them to stay at this practice as long as they can, you know, and ultimately, sometimes having a departure can actually be helpful for everyone, for the therapist that's leaving, for you, for your team. And so I just want to encourage people that if you see people not adhering to the values of your practice, meet with them, discuss that with them directly, not indirectly. You know, hey, I hear this happened, or hey, I witnessed you acting this way. What happened here? You know, again, someone asked me the other day, hey, I want to be a leader here. How can I become part of the leadership team? And I said, look, I think you'd be great, but I heard you said this thing last week in front of people. Like, I can't have you in leadership like that. And I think years ago, I probably would have just evaded that question, but now getting better at saying, hey, this is who we are. This is what I'm looking for, instead of ignoring a problem.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it's, you know, there's so much that goes into this, and just, I admire you, Whitney, for the culture you've created and the place that you have there in Savannah. We've got to be mindful of our time here, and as usual, Whitney and I could talk all day and just get into a lot of fun stuff. But Whitney, tell folks about your consulting. We both do consulting, and we both offer different mastermind groups and communities and that kind of thing. But tell folks about yours.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. So Wise Practice Consulting, like I said, we help faith-based practice owners specifically. That's our niche, even though we can help anyone with their private practice. There are a couple of consultants that work at Wise Practice. We have specialties as far as solo practice or group practice or cash pay, or we have one consultant that specifically talks about how to find your why, creating alternate streams of income. I personally love working with group practice owners. The topics we're talking about right now, I'm really passionate about. And helping people go from an insurance to a private pay practice is something else I really enjoy. You can learn more by going to wisepracticeconsulting.com. There's a lot of stuff there, podcasts, summits, mastermind groups, so all the things. But if you're interested in working with one of us, you can fill out an application. We'll jump on a call with you just to figure out if this is the best fit for you. And then if it is, we can kind of go from there.
Right. And Whitney's got a summit coming up in October, and it'll be in Greenville, South Carolina this year. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, it's going to be at the Grand Bohemian again, which I love working with those hotels. This one is right on the Reedy River, which comes right through Greenville. So yeah, it's going to hopefully be for continuing education. We're in the process of getting that approval from NBCC right now. So hopefully we will have that by then, and we have had it in the past. We have, 13, 14 different speakers coming. Some of the topics are related just to private practice. Some of them are a little more faith-based, but the idea of this conference is, from what I know, it's the only faith-based business conference for private practice owners that's out there. So it's really great and fun, and some really great sponsors as well. So looking forward to being with everyone again in October.
Yeah. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary, as always, to help you find this easily. Well, Whitney, thanks again for being on the podcast. I know for sure you'll be back on here again, but thanks again for taking the time to have this conversation. Well, again, a big thanks to Whitney, one of my besties, joining me on the podcast. And I just always enjoy being with Whitney and being around her. I know she and I and two of our other good friends, Jessica Tepana and Uriah Guilford. So shout out to them. We're going to be doing a retreat together up in Chicago here at the 1st of May. So looking forward to getting together with them. And as you probably hear throughout the podcast, just this theme of the importance of community and being able to have those people around you that help support you, but also give you some accountability, but also help you just find ways to solve problems that maybe you're not able to see yourself. And so I know Whitney has a great membership community. I've got a membership community. And so I'd invite you just to check those out. You've got links here in the show notes for Whitney's page and all of the things that she's got going on. I'm looking forward to another great Wise Practice Summit this fall. But anyway, be sure to check all those things out. And also a big thanks to TherapyNotes. They are the leading electronic health record system for mental health practices. They're who I use in my practice and absolutely could not operate my practice without them. And one of the things that is really cool is they've come out with a lot of new features, getting us in line with all of the new AI technology that's out there and being able to truly shortcut our documentation and do it in a very professional and accurate way. So be sure and check them out. Go to practiceoftherapy.com/therapynotes. And if you'll use that promo code just Gordon, Gordon, you can try them out for 2 months for free. So be sure and check them out. And as always, be sure and check out mentalhealthwaretn.com. We're really trying hard to get this store running and going and being able to support Ashley and also Hope Unite as a way of giving back to the community and helping people become more and more aware of mental health, wellness, and also suicide prevention. So be sure and check that out. So thanks everyone for joining me. Again, got lots of great guests going to join me here in future episodes. I think we're booked out until probably near the end of June with the number of episodes we've got upcoming. So stay with us. And if you will, take time to follow us or subscribe to the podcast wherever you might be listening to it. Take care, folks. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.